if you're going to push yourself to try new things and do new things, you're going to have some things that just don't work.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook presented by Details Interactive. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 14, and today's guest is Joe Megibow, CEO of Purple. Joe is a really interesting guy and longtime industry friend, and I'm sure you'll enjoy his story. Before we get started, a quick thank you as always to Max Brandstetter of the Wild Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at max@hippodirect.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and today's guest is Joe Megibow, the CEO of Purple. Purple is a digitally native vertical brand with a mission to help people feel and live better through innovative comfort solutions. They design and manufacture a variety of innovative, premium, branded comfort products, including mattresses, pillows, cushions, frames, sheets, and more. Purple markets and sells their products through direct-to-consumer online channels, traditional retail partners, third-party online retailers, and their owned retail showrooms. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Well, we're really excited to have you on and talk about your business. And I guess in that little preamble, the more products that you're selling now include a line of masks. You know, we're recording this in early June of 2020. So in many locations, we're starting to relax the rules associated with COVID-19. How are you and your family doing, Joe?
We're doing well. My family's doing well. We closed our corporate offices mid-March, and sadly, we had just moved into our shiny new headquarters where we were only there for, I think, barely 5 or 6 weeks before shutting it down. So the good news is I've spent a lot more time at home, which and my kids who have been out of school, remote schooling as well. It's been great, as I'm sure with most out there, to have more family time. But working remotely carries incredible hours with it too. So it's as with anything, it's a double-edged sword.
So there's a lot to get to here, and I always like to talk with people about their first story, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But obviously with being a public company at Purple and dealing with COVID, what can you tell us about how this has all impacted your business and what you're seeing currently and what you're seeing in the future months coming?
Yeah, certainly this has been a trying time for every company, public or private. Fortunately, when I joined a little more than a year and a half ago, we were not a very stable company at that time. We were not profitable. We were burning cash at a concerning rate, did not have the cash balances we needed to continue operations. And we're already public at that point. We went public through a less traditional means, a SPAC, which is different than an IPO. So seeking financing is a whole different process if you're already public. So we had a lot of work to do over the last year and a half, and fortunately, just the diligence and hard work we had done has us now in a place where we are profitable, we are producing cash, and we've got we're young and early days in our maturity curve, but we've got a company that's operating fairly well right now. I cannot imagine if COVID-19 had hit when we were who we were a year and a half ago. So that gave us some opportunity to be smarter than we probably would have otherwise been. But even with that, the mattress industry is pretty interesting in that it's still a fairly traditional industry and very brick and mortar focused. So call it 4 out of 5 mattresses are purchased in a brick and mortar store. So either a mattress store like Mattress Firm or a furniture store or a department store like a Macy's. It really accounts for the vast majority of purchases. And when COVID-19 hit and people either couldn't or were unwilling to go to stores, or the stores were just shut down, that was half of our units were sold through our partnerships with retail partners. We're a manufacturer that is a vertically integrated retailer, but we're also a brand who sells with retail partners. And that, for all intents and purposes, just disappeared overnight. And, that's challenging. And we had cash in the bank, but that's all we got. And we weren't entirely sure what this meant for the future. Our online business, actually, when this all first hit, plummeted as well. Everything just started to go down. So, like many companies, we went into just ensuring we could survive and some cash preservation. We furloughed about a third of the company. We shut down our manufacturing as we had excess inventory at that point, since we weren't fulfilling the wholesale. So, it was pretty tough times. And, as well as the board agreed to defer comp, and the executive team took a 25% pay cut. And just a variety of things that we just had to do. What's been fascinating is what's happened since then. And it's actually what I'd say is, in these unfortunate times, we've been very fortunate. And really two things happen. One is that discretionary spend has actually, in many ways, grown for many customers. And we service more the premium side of the market, and especially on the premium side, as families were not going on vacation, not taking their spring breaks. They're not dining out. They're not going to shows. They're not going to sporting events. There's actually, believe it or not, more discretionary spend available. And the second thing is, as they've been home more, there's been a much more increased focus on home as a category, which we happen to sit in. And then you combine that with the big shift online, and what ended up happening is, on a units basis, we actually haven't seen any decline at all. We've just seen a massive channel shift, where all of those units we were fulfilling through our wholesale retail partners, we are now fulfilling online, and we've become an almost 100% DTC company, which is not at all where we were coming into COVID-19. And that has financial advantages too. We get basically double the revenue per unit. The margins are better. There's more shipping costs and things like that. So it's not like it's a completely flows right down to the bottom, but the margins are better through e-commerce. So all in, we've been kind of a capacity constrained business. We manufacture ourselves and can only make what we can make. So we sort of ended up in a place where we're fully operational. Everyone who was furloughed has come back. We're actually hiring right now. We're making every mattress we can. We're just selling them differently than we were before. And it's really been quite remarkable what has played out.
That's great. There's a lot to unpack in what you said, but I want to take a step back a little bit and let our listeners know, something about Joe Megibow. So, where'd you grow up, Joe? I know you went to Cornell, interestingly, electrical engineering, and yet you got into marketing and digital marketing. So, give us a little backstory.
Yeah, sure. You don't see the obvious connection there. Yes, I have two New Yorker parents. I grew up in the Midwest, in Topeka, Kansas, where I went through all my schooling through high school. I had a sort of a sucking feeling back to the East Coast, given my parents and my extended family were from out that way. So I ended up at Cornell. I've always been lean toward the sciences. I love building things. I love creating things. As a kid, I was the kid who, anytime I got a toy, first thing I did is grab a screwdriver and took the whole thing apart and generally put it back together, sometimes better than before. It's just kind of who I am. So engineering was something I knew I wanted to do all through high school, and fell directly into that in college. And my first job out of college was actually with an advanced technology group in General Motors, which was a little bit engineering, a lot of software development, but definitely leaning in much more on the technology side. it was actually at GM, and these were tough times for General Motors. So this was in the early 90s, is when I sort of discovered that there's this thing called business. And part of it is during these tough times, they all seem to be having their careers move faster than engineers. And early 90s, the web and the internet hadn't happened yet. So technology was a little more commodity and not necessarily the most coveted skills in an organization. So ironically enough, it was seemed career limiting at the time to be focused on software and tech. So I thought, I got to get out of this. Realized I didn't know a lot about business, so thought I'd go back and go to get a business degree. Not they wanted something to hang on my wall, but just because I really wanted to learn. I realized it was a gap in my knowledge, and I found University of Chicago, which is now Booth Business School, and they had a reputation for being academically rigorous and a very quant-based school, which as an engineer spoke to me. And that's really when I started pivoting into marketing. Was I discovered the notion of not only there was more to work than bits and bytes, but also that you could take a data-driven approach to marketing as well. And I discovered marketing analytics while there, which left there in '96, which is as the web just began to start happening. And as a data-driven marketer, to have the web blossom at that very moment was just a terrific time to be entering the workforce on that side.
Mm. And so one of your early roles was at Expedia. What was the timing of that in kind of the advent of shopping for travel online?
Yeah, so I came in, it's right after business school. I did management consulting for a number of years. I actually helped create a software company where I was at for, I think, a little over 7 years. Then ultimately we sold IBM all around consumer behavior and marketing analytics. Company at the time was called Tea Leaf Technology. So Expedia was one of our bigger customers, is how I got introduced to them. And actually a business school friend of mine had taken over as the president of Hotels.com, and he and I were chit-chatting quite a bit on what our software was suggesting they should do to help improve their business. And one thing led to another, and he challenged me to stop consulting and actually do it, which was a dare I couldn't walk away from. So I jumped to the other side of the table and went into Expedia, which would have been, in like 2006, I believe. So yeah, Expedia launched. They launched probably, I think, 98 or so maybe 8 years earlier. And at that time, as a division of Microsoft, before it spun out when Interactive Core, one of the Barry Diller companies, picked them up. At the time, it may have still been USA Networks. So it already was a major player, and sort of the shift from traditional travel agencies into online was already underway. But it was still a very fragmented industry and still a very, very high growth industry. And this is still pre-Facebook. Google's role in searches on anything other than web content was still in its infancy. So it was still fairly early days. And and most searching at that time was still just kind of database driven, as you think about search websites. So a lot of, whether you're talking recommendations or personalization or profiles, as well as a lot of the psychology of building good user experiences, early days. And I was there about 6 years and was involved with many advances at a company that was really leading a lot of the internet work. We were one of the largest sites out there at that time, which was really just a fun and terrific time to sort of be there as the whole space grew. And online travel certainly became one of the more dominant categories online at that point.
All right, it's interesting. So you were at a disruptor in the travel space, and when we come back and talk about Purple in more detail, I guess you characterize perhaps Purple as a disruptor in the mattress space and the way we buy mattresses to some degree.
Yeah, so Purple's not entirely well understood in that regard, and arguably some of that's our own fault as we continue to tune our messaging. Purple, first of all, what isn't understood is we're actually, we're a 5-year-old company, as Purple, we're built on the shoulders of now about a 31-year-old innovation and licensing company. So our founders are in many ways the fathers of modern consumer gels. So when you think of the blue gels you see in everything, a simple example might be the Dr. Scholl's foot inserts with the little blue gels you put inside the insoles in your shoes. So that's all their invention. Prior to these guys, gels was sort of something that was a commercial ingredient you put inside of things. It wasn't anything you ever looked at. And some of the earliest patents on things like translucent and evenly tinted gels are all theirs. And Dr. Scholl's actually, I think Dr. Scholl's is like a 150-year-old company, but as they were looking to reinvent themselves, all of the gel products they had were licensed directly from our founders. And they got into a variety of gel-based inventions, and we've amassed over these decades over 100 patents issued or pending. And they came up with some novel ways to deal with cushioning and some tough applications. And two that really were transformative were medical seat cushions and medical beds. And this was over 2 decades ago now. And in the case of medical seat cushions, you think of things like wheelchairs. When you are chronically sitting, there's all sorts of challenges in circulation and bed sores that are very problematic and potentially even fatal. And they came up with some ways to mold, first of all, some new inventions of the gels themselves. So some elastic polymers that allowed for a certain amount of stretch and flex and recoils. And some think of it as almost like buoyancy, as well as arranging gel in an arrangement of a grid pattern, which creates what in physics would buckling columns. So it's the network of intersections across the grid actually create these little load-bearing columns that individually just break away with very little pressure, but collectively create an even weight distribution. And this had some really novel capabilities for things like these medical uses, which is it actually allowed for high circulation, it allowed for high airflow, which allowed heat and energy to dissipate. It had much better even weight distribution so that you didn't have pressure points being aggravated, whether, again, you're sitting or laying. So wheelchairs was a very easy application. And in medical beds, as you got into some tough care things, like, for instance, burn unit victims, if you think about someone who is head-to-toe burns, they want the most even weight distribution you can have. You don't want pressure anywhere, and you want a very temperature-neutral surface. You don't want anything that's absorbing energy or heat and radiating back at you. And this was perfect for that. And this was decades ago. The challenge is that making these beds was very expensive and very slow. It's a very time-consuming process to make these large format gel surfaces. And really what Purple was the invention of some entirely new manufacturing equipment that only we have. We make the machines themselves that allowed us to do this at scale and at cost. A much better cost profile, which went from being a specialty niche product for things like expensive medical applications to something we could actually scale up at the consumer level, and that's how Purple was born. Now, you put that all together, and it means everything I just said isn't dependent on the internet. We've actually invented a better way to create a sleep surface, and this hasn't been done in a long time. The last real invention in mattresses was the introduction of memory foam, which was over 30 years ago now. So at our core, we are a technically differentiated company with different manufacturing, different materials, and a different offering. The web actually just allowed us, if you think about what happened with like memory foam and Tempur-Pedic, or a different technology that came out almost 35 years ago now, which is adjustable air mattresses. So companies like Sleep Number, it took decades for them to achieve a certain scale. What the internet has allowed us to do is reach and get access to customers at an unprecedented rate in this category. But the key is where I'd say most of the early adopters of online selling, think of companies, the biggest one would be a company like Casper. They were strictly a convenience play. These are mostly commodity mattresses made by third parties in contract manufacturing that service the value side of the market. So generally sub $1,000 mattresses and often, $500 or $600 mattresses. Some are made domestically, most are made overseas and imported. And the big thing is convenience. You don't have to go into a mattress store. You can buy it online. It's an easier way to buy our mattress. And we certainly get that benefit too. But for us, it's always been about how do we create a better mattress. And it's one reason, even in our go-to-market strategy, while we launched as an e-commerce player, we've taken a very omnichannel approach. And, to the point earlier when we were talking about COVID-19, meaning we're sold in 1,800 retail doors. And we do well there and earn a mattress may only have, say, 30 beds on the floor, and we're typically getting 4 of those slots. So we're getting significant square footage on the floor, and we get it because we have a differentiated product that converts really well. And it's not just because of marketing, it's because we have a different product, which is a fundamental tenet of great product and merchandising. So it really is a very different kind of company, and we're on a very different kind of mission.
You said that perhaps the way the company is perceived, not by all, but by some, may be your own doing. Do you think that the message, and I want to talk about your advertising because I think some of the advertising is just amazing, whimsical and very technical in nature, but really well done. So does the average consumer who's out there looking for a mattress, do they immediately, think about Purple and Casper and some of the others? Are they lumping, you all into the same pool? Or is that message really coming through that you are differentiated?
It's changed a lot over the last couple of years. And a lot of that has been driven by getting our product into brick and mortar stores where you can actually see it and have it hold its own against other players. So the category is interesting. We looked and roughly 3/4 of the units sold are value mattresses. And one of the largest global retailers and manufacturers of mattresses is none other than IKEA, who may not be the top name you think of when you think about name mattress companies. But it's, and Amazon, by the way, is becoming a very large player, and they're leaning into their own brand. Amazon Basics, Walmart, who was doing work with Tuft & Needle, has launched their own brand with Allswell. So the major value retailers who already have the customer, and given that it's largely commoditized mattresses, are selling their own and selling their own in very high numbers. But what's interesting is those majority of units that are moved in the category, and domestically it's about a $16 billion category annually, they only represent about 35%, I believe, of industry revenues, a little more than a third, 35 to 40%. The revenue is all on the other side. So these small amount, 25, 30% of units are driving 2/3 of the revenue, and the margins, by the way, are much better there too. So I don't have the exact number, but probably close to 3/4 of the profits. And if you look at all the internet disruptors, they're all playing on the low end. Who the category is dominated by, the 2 largest players are Sealy Tempur-Pedic, who own Sealy, Tempur-Pedic, Stearns & Foster, and other premium brands. And they're about a $3 billion revenue company, or since they're almost entirely all brick and mortar retail, call it $6 billion of the $16 billion. And the other really big player on the premium side is Sleep Number, who's more like $1.5 billion. So, those are the giant players. The other big player is Serta Simmons, but they've been a little more down market and have had some challenges. So our goal has been, how do we not get lumped in with the Caspers and Lisas and Tuft & Needles and Helixes and, on and on. It's how do we get lumped into the Tempur-Pedics and the Sleep Numbers as a premium mattress, because we start at about $1,100 and we go up to more like $3,000 for a mattress. So historically, it was very easy for us to get lumped into the mix, and we're just yet another internet player, and it's just memory foam, right? And wow, it seems kind of expensive. Is that just, for the marketing? And it also, because of the whimsical ads, it indexed young, it indexed much more male. If you kind of get locked into the Monty Python type of whimsy, it's very sophomoric. You're going to index male. And, oh, by the way, especially on the premium side, it's over 80% driven by the female buyer in the household. So, if you really want to win in the premium side of the space, you've got to be older and you've got to be much more relevant for her. And we were a young male brand, which that we had done as well as we had is remarkable, but we were really only servicing a subset of the overall market. And that's been part of the challenge is how do we not just appear gimmicky and just funny, but actually differentiated, relevant, premium, and I don't want to say more serious, but something you would more seriously consider. And
Right.
we've evolved a lot that way, but it's been a challenge.
When you sell so much of your product in other retailers' stores, I've had other conversations and I've worked in businesses that are, wholesalers. You're so reliant or heavily reliant on those stores telling your story and having the sales associate be able to explain, what you just said so passionately about Purple. How do you control that? How do you control the story and the narrative when you're relying on other people to do it for you?
Yeah, well, obviously, as being in the space, it takes work. And, we've had to invest in a field sales team and field support and learn how to be not just an internet player, but a great wholesale partner, because it is a different buying cycle. And by the way, even just fulfillment, pick and pack, shipping an individual mattress to one person is a very different game than getting a PO for 6,000 mattresses that need to be at a distribution center next week. And how we operate as a business and how we manage that kind of SLAs and inventory, the cash cycles are different. Online, it's call it maybe 48 hours from order to cash, whereas now you're actually having to build significant amounts of inventory, support it, ship it, and it might be 30 or 45 days before you see the cash. This was very, very transformative for us to learn to go from being a predominantly digitally native business to being a true wholesale retail brand. And it really is a very different business. The good news is, if you can excuse the pun, a very sleepy category. There's a lot of price points on the floor in any mattress department or mattress store, but the amount of real differentiation is slim. Yes, you got memory foam or not memory foam, and there's all sorts of things they've done to try to surfaces that feel cooling to the top or to the touch, or different ways to treat foams by infusing them with a little bit of gel on top, with again, is mostly to counteract just foams get hot. It's like a kitchen sponge absorbing water. They absorb energy and heat. So ways to counteract that. But there really hasn't been a lot new to talk about. So the one good thing we've had is you combine the fact that we've got a very quirky, different brand. We're very bold in our branding. Our mattresses it's embossed. It's not like high contrast, but we throw the logo right across the mattress. It's kind of purple. We are very confident, very proud of what we've done. And there's a story underneath. It's when you feel our mattress. I kind of like the first time you lay in a waterbed or the first time you drive an electric car. There's just something really different about it that if you're not ready for it can even be off-putting. And our bed just feels different, and it's something for the associate to talk about. So whether they sell our mattress or a different mattress, what they want is a way to help navigate that customer to a product, and we have a story to tell. And that's the best thing you can have if you want to merchandise, is actually have something to talk about. And we got something shiny to talk about, and it's just been terrific in terms of our ability to train and get the message out.
It's funny. I worked for a company called the Company Store years ago. We sold, down comforters and pillows and sheets and all. And, we used to talk about, people wanting to, not spend on their bedding. And, somewhere along the line, somebody came up with the most obvious thing in the world that, that we spend, a third of our life perhaps in this bed, on this bed.
Right.
And
right.
we spend way less time in the on the bed and in the bed than we do in a car. And look what we spend for a car, and we won't spend the money required to get a good mattress and a good night's sleep. So sometimes those things just have to hit you over the head before you get it, right?
But just the car one's interesting, and I've thought about this a lot too, because the key difference And yeah, so I mean, it's a considered purchase. It's a durable good. It's expensive to get a premium mattress. It's expensive, and you're going to keep it for maybe a decade. The difference of the car, and where this is just an interesting merchandising challenge, is you see cars all over. You see new models, you see new designs, you see them all over the road. You have some sense of what's popular just driving down the street. Hey, I'm seeing a lot of Teslas or VWs or whatever is suddenly bubbling up as the hot thing of the moment. And you have a chance to actually you go to lunch and someone in a different car than yours, you get to ride as a passenger and experience other people's cars. So I mean, there's a lot of cross-pollination of knowledge and experiences and visibility. Beds are funny because I agree with you. I mean, you spend a lot of your time there. But, you go visit a friend's house and they're not like, hey, want to come into my bedroom and check out my mattress?
It's not a status thing. It's not a status, whereas cars have...
check out my Purple? Exactly. So, and by the way, it's underneath bed, it's in a frame and it's underneath bedding and a protector and sheets. So you're not even seeing the mattress. So, it begs an interesting question on how do you even know? How do you get to the truth? How do you experience these things? Imagine if when buying a car, you couldn't take it on a test drive. All you could do is smell the interior and sit in it for a minute. I mean, even going to a mattress store, what does bouncing or laying on a mattress have to do with how you're going to feel 6 weeks from now being up on it every day? Which is why we have things like the 100-day guarantee. But it's an interesting merchandising challenge.
Yeah, and speaking of selling and all those retailers and the fact we've got COVID-19, I'm sure there's been conversation around how things will change, perhaps in store for laying on a bed.
Yeah, I've heard very mixed things from the retail partners we've spoken with. We have some of our own showrooms as well, and they've done really well for us. It was interesting. One of the insights, and it kind of gets to just what we were talking about. One of the insights we had was cleanliness matters. That consumers, I mean, it's weird enough laying down on a mattress in a public setting, and you're not normally laying on a naked mattress. And there is just something weird about, I mean, it's like trying on shoes without socks, or, it's just kind of weird to get on something you really don't want to think about how many people have laid on this before you. So we played that long before COVID-19 hit. We were doing this in Q4 last year. We started saying, well, what if we put sheets on the mattresses, which means hiding the product. I mean, you literally can't see the mattress then, and we've got different models on the floor, and you can't really see which is which. So we're going to have to rely on signage and other ways to tell you what's there. But we change the sheets daily. We launder them. It looks like what you think of as a bed. I mean, when you walk into a hotel room, for instance, with a clean bed, you just want to lay on it. So it's inviting, it's clean, it's familiar. Oh, by the way, it helps us sell sheets because they're experiencing the whole bed, not just the mattress. And it feeds into exactly the sense of cleanliness and familiarity that consumers want. So we were already doing that. And I think we were a little ahead of the game on this. My gut is that you're going to see more of those kinds of insights and ways to service the customer as you really start to think about not just how do I make the product splashy on the floor. I mean, a lot of what's designed into a mattress is just so it will sell compared to other mattresses, not necessarily performance or how it's going to be in your bedroom. We've gone the other way and said, none of that matters. Let's really just create that clean experience. And it actually works really well for us.
The devil's in the details. You've probably heard that phrase time and time again in your professional life. Projects get started with great intentions, but you no longer have the time to pay attention to the little things that can make the difference between success and failure. At Details Interactive, you can discuss your business with a seasoned direct-to-consumer marketing executive who has helped launch and grow web businesses and integrate multi-channel marketing initiatives. Learn more at detailsinteractive.com.
I want to talk about advertising in a second, but
Sure.
before we do that, we didn't even get a chance to talk about your time at American Eagle, but I think Purple is obviously more relevant for what you're doing today. I'm sure, even though you're an accomplished executive, there must be some mistakes that you've made along the way, not just necessarily at Purple. Anything stand out of something that perhaps was right at the right, you had the information available, you made a decision, but it turned out wrong. And if so, how do you deal with mistakes that you make?
Yeah, trust me, I've made a lot of mistakes. And you can't have it both ways. I've always been a big believer in test and learn, try new things. And if when I was more on the data analytical side of things, if I'm looking at a testing program, loosely speaking, I would expect if you're running a large number of tests, you'd expect a third to be conclusively good. You'd expect a third to kind of be inconclusive, I don't know, there wasn't a clear signal and what worked and what didn't. And I would expect a third to just be total failures. It did not reveal, it definitively was not better or produced worse results. What's funny though is you look at a lot of testing programs and all they talk about is the winners and there's no losers, which means either you're only testing things you already knew the outcome to, or you're not really testing at all. So you can't have it both ways. If you're gonna push yourself to try new things and do new things, you're going to have some things that just don't work. But I'll give you an example. I mean, even individually on the career side. So you brought up American Eagle. I got hired into American Eagle. Ultimately, my role was called Chief Digital Officer. I suspect one of a handful of people with that title, as it was a very, very new title at the time, and one I was never fully comfortable with. The idea that you need a Chief Digital Officer felt to me like a transitionary role. It's kind of like saying the internet is a distinct channel to a different customer, which clearly is not true. It's ubiquitous. Whatever channel you're buying in, you're still going online first. Everybody is online. So, is it different marketing? No, you have a CMO. Is it different operations? No, you've got retail operations. Is it different technology? Well, you probably had an IT department dealing with POS and inventory management and customer databases. And so, it's in many ways, creating a whole separate e-commerce capability is a silo that does not reflect the consumer. So, in my case, I viewed it as a bootstrapping capability, which was how do I take a traditional brick and mortar retailer and help them integrate the digital side of the business with a hope that at some point you don't need a chief digital officer and everything is fully integrated. So I kind of tried to engineer myself out of a long-term job. And in a lot of ways, that's what ultimately happened. But when I went into it, we had a really, really forward-thinking, visionary CEO who hired me. And I would have walked on water for him. And he really pushed me. And he was the first, really, in many ways, the first leader I'd ever had that was deeply intellectually curious with what I did and actually tried really hard to understand. So I wasn't in a constant state, which had been most of my career, of sort of defense. Hey, I'm down in the basement somewhere inventing new things that you don't understand, but please let me do a little more of this. It was more of a, hey, this is a cornerstone of our strategy, and I got your back. And boy, was that wonderful. I loved that. And then he got fired. And not that long into my job, just a whole lot of reasons why, but he didn't work out with the board. And I suddenly found myself in an organization that had been a carve up, because my role didn't exist before, and a carve up from the rest of the org, taking on a whole lot of work that was the vision and strategy of the CEO who wasn't there anymore. And I discovered that I didn't exactly have the support of all my peers who we were now collectively running the company while we were in a very long hunt for a new CEO. And none of them really were with me. And it wasn't that they thought I was some, not nice person or something. It was just what I was tasked to do and what I was working on wasn't necessarily aligned with what they saw for their own departments or roles. And, one of the things I had realized is because the CEO had my back and because I could, for the first time in my career, just focus on getting crap done, I didn't take the time to independently build the peer followership and support that I needed across the organization. And then you take that leader away and I'm left with nothing. And I probably lost a solid year of work having to build that trust up and build that support up and get back on track. Fortunately, I didn't lose my job. Fortunately, the board and we'd accomplished enough by then that I'd sort of earned the right to stick around. It would have been often when a CEO's left, a lot of the people they bring in are out the door quickly after. So, the timing was enough that I had proven enough that, hey, might be worth at least keeping me around a little. But my trajectory was just literally stopped at its tracks. And I had a lot of work to do to sort of rebuild up what we were trying to do and get it going again and do it in a way with full support and partnership with the rest of the organization and not just sort of thrust upon them. And that was a huge learning moment for me and, a mistake I hopefully will never make again. You've got to build support and partnership. You've got to build followership. You've got to make sure you've got everyone on board, no matter who has sponsored or who has told you what to do. It's just, these are the lessons we learn, and this is how we become stronger and better leaders.
Absolutely. Good call out. So let's go to advertising. We've talked a bunch about, the ads that you guys have done. I'm interested in your perspective on, maybe help us understand not only the themes that you are out there with. I mean, you're talking a lot about, the technology of the product, as you've talked about, earlier in this podcast, but, also talk about the various channels. I mean, I go on, and I'm seeing you, I think, on Pandora and kind of the non-traditional, at least what was thought of to be non-traditional marketing channels. Can you give us kind of that quick overview?
Yeah, so when we got started, we were one of the earliest players in video. So we weren't first. A notable play that was a little before us was Dollar Shave Club, who really built their business on some viral videos. At the time that they were acquired, believe it or not, we actually had more success and more views, and we were both probably equally known or not known. We were, relatively small companies each. It's just getting bought by Unilever suddenly introduces the world to your brand, and they got a lot of exposure for viral video marketing. But we've had a very similar kind of run. Our videos alone, we're at 1.8 billion views of all videos combined, which just pausing for a moment and saying it's effectively mattress commercials. So we have had 1.8 billion views of mattress commercials, which is just kind of remarkable. And, our launch video, the Goldilocks video that started it all itself has had over 500 million views. In some ways it was kind of a crazy initial attempt. We were a young company, well, not even young, we were a non-existent company. We were just launching. We had done a Kickstarter to bootstrap the business. So we launched actually as a Kickstarter. We launched the mattress. We had been shipping the mattress from 60, 75 days when we launched the first ad. And, imagine an advertising strategy. It's like, let's take our entire marketing budget, put it into one 4-minute explainer video, 4 minutes. And, and it either works or we've got no business. Sound good? Good, go. And that's kind of what we did. Now the good news is we hired a really inventive social media production company to make it, a company called Harmon Brothers. We used just a phenomenal comedy troupe that had come out of BYU TV. It's called Studio C, which just had a remarkable knack for comedy that just really was just the right amount of edgy, but not too grown up and friendly. And so, we had all the right pieces. We also actually tested the heck out of it. So I think we had something like 30 or 40 different opening lines in the video, and we tested and tried on all these different variations before we actually put any real money behind it. So, it was we rigged it in a way to get it set up for success with the right people making it, the right talent, and a whole lot of testing before we leaned hard into it. And at a time that the economics were very favorable, and it was a channel that allowed for a good degree of arbitrage. And it worked out really, really well for us. And one of the things we have continued to do with video, and we've since ended up, we produce most of it in-house now, is we just haven't been afraid to keep banging out content. I look at a lot of other companies that they dabble in video, do a few pieces. It's expensive. I mean, it can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to make one of these. It's expensive, and they don't always work. They're hit and miss. And some of our videos have been just total flops. They just didn't connect with the consumer. But we've taken more of a portfolio strategy, which is almost how you do it in media, which is just you keep banging out content. And even for the ones that are expensive and miss, the ones that hit big and more than offset for the misses. And you just keep at it, and you get better at it, and you keep it going. And that's really been a major part of our marketing strategy, is around that content and just the frequency and relentless push to keep that going.
Yeah. I've seen it all over. So the work that you guys are doing is great. And the videos, you're not fearful of doing things that are long too. Not just 30-second spots. I mean, I've seen ones that are multiple minutes, right?
Yeah. And again, our first one was nearly 4 minutes long. And that's changed as channels have changed and how you need to produce content. And, producing a video now is really producing a large collection of videos in a variety of aspect ratios and formats, and with or without audio or composited text on top, and how long it needs to be. And you really have to think about it in many, many different ways. But again, that just comes from keep going at it, keep working it. And, it surprises me how few companies have the fortitude to do that. But, we're all in.
All right. Well, I could have spent many hours talking to you, Joe. We're coming down to the end of our time right now. But before we go, I like to ask all of our guests, there's 7 questions, just brief answers, could be 1 word or 2 words. Can I shoot those to you?
Sure.
All right. So the first one is a brand that you admire or that inspires you.
Yeah, right now that's pretty easy for me. I am unashamed to say I've got Dyson envy. Just when I look at what they've built, and taking a category that didn't have a lot of brand connection and hadn't had a lot of real innovation, and to have created a fundamentally different kind of product, take over the market, build a real genuine brand and brand connection with the consumer, and then on top of that, cross into entirely different categories successfully, based on the strength of their engineering, design, and brand connection. Just remarkable. And it's absolutely what we aspire to do.
Yeah, I think my daughter has talked about the hair dryer that is a Dyson. We'll have to
exactly please, I want the hairdryer from the vacuum cleaner company. Just remarkable.
Yep. Favorite app on your telephone?
I'm very app promiscuous and constantly downloading and trying new apps. I looked at one point, it's been into the thousands. And when I was Expedia, I launched mobile for Expedia. I ran mobile. So I've been a mobile fanatic since the days, since pre-iPhone. Actually at hotels.com, I got to launch one of the first 500 apps on the original iPhone, and when it launched on App Day. So I've been at this a long time. But my answer would be, believe it or not, the camera app. The camera app means something really good is happening, whether it's family or friends or something amazing I've seen. But when I'm launching the camera app, it's for purpose and something I want to remember or memorialize. And those are the moments I most treasure.
Okay. The last website other than Amazon or Purple that you shopped from?
So the honest answer is Costco, which probably isn't what you're looking for. But the one before that was a new apparel site I recently found that I've been enjoying, which is called Roan, which is mostly men's athletic and some casual wear.
Oh, that's interesting. How do you spell that?
RHONE.
Ah, okay. We'll have to check that out. Great. Something that you wish that you were good at, but that you're not.
Probably the biggest thing would be I admire people who keep a diary and just have that running notebook that they are just rigorously manage. I have never been good at it. I've tried every which way, physical and electronic. It's just not how I operate. Somehow I get by. But I've always wished that I could master that.
Okay. A charitable organization that you're passionate about.
We tried it. We spread around a little. I'd say if there's anyone that we keep going back to, we're a dog family and have supported through the years many rescue organizations, have fostered and adopted many dogs. So that's probably the one we've spent more energy on than anything.
Okay. And lastly, other than family, what's your most prized possession?
Goodness. I'm not someone who covets stuff. Though I am a gadget guy who always loves playing with new gadgets. But if there's any one thing, it's probably my old HP calculator from the late 80s that still does RPM notation, and I can't live without. And they don't make them anymore. So that's probably the one.
I know exactly the one you're talking about too. That's sad.
It's the 42S, which is not the 12C, or which they actually started remaking.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's a remarkable calculator. So all you HP fans out there, keep strong.
All right. Well, Joe, this was great. Thank you for the time. It was really interesting learning about your business. We'll keep an eye out for all the good things that you're doing, and hope to see you sometime down the road.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much for the time.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to Joe Megibow for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's 3 game-winning marketing plays were as follows. Mistakes. We all make them. Some will say that if we do not make any, we're not trying hard enough. In Joe's example, in his role at American Eagle, looking back, he thinks that he should have done more to build support and partnership with his colleagues. We can only be successful if we are aligned, not only with our supervisors, but also with our peers. Work hard to make this happen. Number 2, tune your message. Marketing is hard, and unless you're constantly shaping your communication to customers, you can often stray from what you think you stand for. It's easy to think of Purple as a mattress company, but as Joe said, they're solving a comfort problem. Be sure that you're differentiating your product through end use, quality, price point, and other attributes. And number 3, be pragmatic about your skills and constantly look for the gaps in your knowledge and ways to fill those gaps. If your education took you down the path of the sciences and engineering as Joe's did, look for an opportunity to get some business classes under your belt. Being able to read and understand the P&L is one of the best ways to learn a business. I started in finance and moved into marketing early in my career, and that was really helpful in doing my job. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Twitter at DetailsInteract and learn more at detailsinteractive.com. Until next time, the devil is in the details.